Good afternoon, I'm Kristen Achkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. A 30-year-old man is dead after a shooting in the Sandy Bay Ojibway First Nation last Friday night. According to a Manitoba RCMP press release, on October 18th at around 11:25 p.m., the Sandy Bay Detachment of the Manitoba First Nation Police Service responded to a report of shots fired at a residence located in the First Nation. When officers arrived, they found a man deceased on the scene. RCMP Major Crime Services and RCMP Forensic Identification Services continued their investigation this week. So far, no one has been arrested, and police are asking anyone with information to come forward. RCMP is also investigating a shooting in the Nishnawayasik Cree Nation that left a teenager seriously injured over the weekend. On Saturday, October 19th at around 2:25 a.m., Nelson House RCMP received a report of someone being shot inside a residence on Linklater Road in the First Nation. Officers located a 13-year-old male who suffered injuries from a gunshot and was taken to a Winnipeg hospital with life-threatening injuries. Officers determined that shots were fired at the house and a bullet passed through the walls of the living room and victim's bedroom and hit the 13-year-old while he was in bed. 5 people were in the home at the time, including 3 other youth. The victim underwent treatment and is now stable. So far, no arrests have been made and the investigation continues. Police do not believe there is a larger public safety threat because the home was targeted. The Manitoba Metis Federation has announced the establishment of a new company, the Red River Metis Power Corporation. The plan is to develop, own, and operate high-quality alternative energy infrastructure, including wind farms. In a press release, the MMF says the goal is to eventually produce 300 megawatts of wind energy for residential, commercial, and industrial users. In comparison, the MMF says 100 megawatts can provide electricity to 30,000 homes a day, or the equivalent of all the homes in the cities of Brandon, Selkirk, and Thompson combined. They hope to deliver the energy to publicly owned Manitoba Hydro, which says it will need 600 megawatts of wind power in the near future. The announcement comes a month after the province released the Manitoba Affordable Energy Plan, which has an Indigenous loan guarantee to ring in what they call a, quote, new era of nation-to-nation energy partnership. A long-promised flood protection plan is going back to the drawing board. CTV's Jeff Keel has the latest.
Emmanuel Rainville never could have imagined water from Lake Manitoba spilling towards his St. Laurent home. But in 2011, water filled his garage and flooded his property, forcing him and his wife out.
When we left here, we didn't know what was happening. Water was rushing through the yard here.
Rainville and his wife spent 2 years in Winnipeg before returning. He doesn't want this to ever happen again to him and his neighbors.
It was traumatic. It was hard, yeah.
But a long-promised flood mitigation project to curb the next big flood, first promised by NDP Premier Greg Selinger, may be back to square one.
So we're really in a starting over place.
The Canoe government has asked Ottawa to pause an environmental assessment of a $600 million channel that would drain water from Lake Manitoba to Lake St. Martin and from there to Lake Winnipeg. The province says it needs to do consultations with First Nations communities, including potential changes to the project's design to address their concerns.
We need flood mitigation. Whether it looks exactly like the original vision at the end of the day, that is going to be decided in collaboration with communities.
A federal report in June said the project would impact Indigenous land use, and the Interlake Reserves Tribal Council says First Nations communities were never properly consulted by the former PC government.
We're not opposed to it. We just want to be a part of what's going on. Inclusion is the word I'm looking for.
The Tories dispute the notion no discussions took place and are critical of a potential delay.
I think the Premier and the Infrastructure Minister are definitely going to be on the hook for yet another flood under their watch.
Back on the shore, Emmanuel Rainville doesn't care which design is chosen to drain water. He just wants the protection in place because he knows firsthand the lake can rise in an instant.
I mean, how much studying can you do about it? Get a channel done. I mean, get an agreement with whoever you need to get the agreement with.
Jeff Keel, CTV News, Winnipeg.
According to Canada Mortgage and Housing, there are more rental units available across Canada, but rent continues to rise while vacancy rates drop. That has the Métis Nation Saskatchewan bringing some affordable housing to 3 areas of the province. MNS is launching 2 affordable housing projects in northern Saskatchewan. The first will be a pair of 3-bedroom duplexes in La Ronge. The second involves a tiny house in Timber Bay, built by Correctional Services of Canada inmates to teach them construction skills. It should be ready for move-in by end of this month. MNS will also build 8 more tiny homes in La Loche once they hire a contractor. Rent will either be income-based or a flat fee, but it will be lower than average, and MNS citizens get dibs. Matthew Gadet is Acting Director of Housing for the MNS.
It's not the ones on a trailer kind of that you see on HGTV and stuff. They're basically, imagine a small cabin, 400 square foot bungalow with a little kitchen, 1 bedroom, a little bathroom, maybe a closet the ones we're doing in La Loche are going to have a loft.
The tight race for power in British Columbia still has no clear winner as the NDP and Conservatives remain locked in dead heat. The NDP is either elected or leading in 46 ridings, and the Tories have won or are leading in 45. That means each party is just a seat or 2 shy of the 47 needed to win a majority government. The race will come down to final polls, mail-in ballots, and out-of-district votes. The final count will begin on October 26th. Regardless of who wins the election, the results indicate a blow to the once dominant NDP and a major gain for the Conservatives.
This has been a night where we have seen the political landscape in British Columbia change forever.
We got to do better. And that was our commitment to British Columbians. We got to do better. And we will do better. We will do better.
Both NDP leader David Eby and Conservative leader John Rustad held their own ridings. Rustad easily won his seat with over 60% of the vote. He has held that seat since 2005. Eby won his 4th term in Vancouver Point Grey. 3 NDP ministers are projected to lose. If Rustad wins, BC will have its first Conservative government in nearly a century. The Yukon hasn't updated its electoral boundaries since 2008. Now, with a population that's ever growing, an independent commission recently released its final report with suggestions on how to improve representation in the territory's legislature. As Sarah Connors tells us, Yukon's NDP party is advocating for one First Nations riding in particular to remain on its own.
The Yukon Electoral Boundaries Commission released its final report on Yukon's electoral boundaries. There are currently 19 ridings in the territory, 11 of which are in Whitehorse. Earlier this spring, the commission suggested merging the Vuntut-Gwitchin riding and the fly-in community of Old Crow, with a population of less than 200 people, with the Klondike riding. The proposed merge would better balance the number of votes. But the commission found there was disagreement with its suggestion. Some argued the Vuntut-Gwitchin riding is unique because of its remoteness and strong First Nations identity. After considering public feedback, the commission changed its recommendation. Its final report notes the Vuntut-Gwitchin riding should remain separate.
Rural Yukon is going to lose as Whitehorse grows. And it's really important that we make sure that there's still rural voices.
Now, Yukon NDP leader Kate White wants to take the issue one step further. Last week, she put forward a private member's bill to amend the Elections Act. It would guarantee 8 rural MLAs, regardless of population growth in Whitehorse. The amendment would also help preserve the electoral district of Vuntut-Gwitchin as its own separate riding. The bill could be up for a final vote as early as next week.
It's really important that Vuntut-Gwitchin, despite its very small population, it still has representation.
The Vuntut-Gwitchin First Nation said in a statement, it's glad to see the commission recommended it remain its own riding, and it supports White's bill. Earlier this week, Yukon government tabled the territory's new Electoral Boundaries Act. The act contains recommendations from the commission's final report. The bill still requires legislative approval before it can become law. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Brr, it's snowing there. Thank you, Sarah. King Charles III is making his first royal visit to Australia as king, and not all were happy with his visit to the country. We'll tell you more after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. As King Charles continued his tour in Australia this week, he was suddenly heckled by an Indigenous senator on Monday after giving a speech to Australia's Parliament. Have a listen.
Give us our land back! Give us what you stole from us! Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people! You destroyed our land! Give us a treaty! We want a treaty in this country! You are a genocider! This is not your land! This is not your land! You are not our kids! You are not our kids!
That was Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe demanding King Charles return stolen Indigenous land. It happened as King Charles and Queen Camilla visited Australia's capital to meet with the nation's leaders, including Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. According to the University of Newcastle, Australia, from 1788 to the 1930s, the arrival of British settlers led to the deaths of more than 11,000 Indigenous people. Almost half were killed by police or other government forces. Indigenous people in Australia never ceded sovereignty and have never engaged in a treaty process with the British Crown. The Bank of Canada is set to make its latest interest rate announcement on Wednesday. The key lending rate currently sits at 4.25%, and forecasters are anticipating it will be slashed by either 25 or 50 basis points. Statistics Canada reported the annual pace of inflation fell to 1.6% last month, which is below the bank's 2% target. Several economists are also predicting a similar cut in December. Today in Winnipeg, 150 backpacks filled with items like mittens and sleeping bags were handed out to people in need. It's part of an annual initiative called Backpacks from Heaven. The initiative was started by the family of Destiny Talu, who died in 2018 from an accidental fentanyl overdose. She was just 22 years old. On Friday, more than 100 people lined up outside the Salvation Army to receive a backpack. Talu's boyfriend, Sean Neufeld, was instrumental in starting the initiative. Sadly, he also died in 2021 from an overdose. Sean's dad, Chuck Neufeld, says they've kept the initiative going, aiming to increase the number of backpacks each year. He spoke about the need for better mental health and addiction supports in Manitoba.
There isn't enough support. You know, people go into a treatment facility and there's no transition places for them to reside, to keep them off of the streets and off of the drugs and stuff that they're doing. Mental health, it's a fast turnaround at some of these clinics. They walk in and they told them there's no room, go out in the street. So there's not enough help. And I don't know what the situation is, how we can change that situation. Just the government's got to throw more money at it, because people that are camped out on the street, on the riverbanks and in parking lots, winter's coming quickly. And there's a lot more people that are out in the streets than there has been in the past.
Governor General Mary Simon has recently been under fire, especially from Quebec media, over her inability to speak in French. On an all-new episode of Face to Face this week, Simon says she has grown pretty thick when it comes to criticism after more than 4 decades in public life.
I have had to build a thick skin. I've been through different scenarios in my own career, lot of adversity. You know, you have to use adversity as a way to grow, not as becoming a victim. And that's what I did. I looked at every adverse situation that I went through, including this time, and to see how I can continue building my own character as a person. So it's, you know, it's just, it doesn't make you feel less. Every time I get criticized, just like all humans do, probably, you feel something, that you're being attacked. You know, so you respond as a human being. But it's how you use that response, I think, is important.
And every week we ask you 3 web poll questions on our website. Here are the results of our latest website poll questions from last week. First question we asked was, do you support the idea of compulsory addiction treatment? With 41% saying yes and 39% answering no. 20% said they were unsure. Next, we asked, are you familiar with the First Nations child welfare reform that Chiefs are considering this week, which was voted down by Chiefs on Thursday evening? This was a split, with 51% saying yes and 49% saying no. And lastly, we asked, is the Trudeau government wavering when it comes to reconciliation on the legacy of residential schools? A majority of you answered yes, with 67%, while 17% said they weren't sure and 16% said no. Thank you all for taking the time to participate in our weekly web polls. There will be brand new questions at aptnnews.ca, so make sure to check that out. It's time for our final break, but next we'll talk to a man who's the focus of a new documentary from director Ryan Dickey that talks about food sovereignty. Stay with us. Starting on the east, St. John's 12, Charlottetown 18. Cartwright 10, La Grande River 6. Saguenay 12, Val-d'Or 14. 22 in Peterborough, Sault Ste. Marie 9. Wawa 14, Thunder Bay 14 as well. -3 in Churchill, Thompson -1. 9 in Gimli, Dauphin 5. Regina 7, Saskatoon 10. Meadow Lake +5, Stony Rapids -3. Snow in Fort McMurray and +1, Peace River -3. Lethbridge 9, Calgary 3. 14 in Penticton, 12 in Campbell River. Fort Nelson -4, Deeds Lake -6. -9 in Watson Lake, -6 in Mayo. Watee -5, Wrigley -9. -4 in Pawtuck and Sax Harbor -4. Baker Lake -5, Chesterfield -4. And Clyde River -2, Arctic Bay -7. And finally, a new documentary is taking a look at the impacts of colonization and the climate crisis on food sovereignty. The film Tea Creek, directed by Ryan Dickey, focuses on Jacob Beaton, who transformed his family farm into a food sovereignty training center. Jacob Beaton joined our Dennis Ward earlier.
Jacob, thanks so much for taking some time to speak with us here today. Can you tell us about your family farm and why you wanted to turn it into an Indigenous food sovereignty training center?
Sure, absolutely. So we purchased the farm back in 2018 as a personal journey for my family and I, wanting to get back to the land, wanting to be food sovereign as a family. We were living in town and we just always wanted this for our family. So we found this beautiful property that's now called Tea Creek. And in purchasing it, I didn't realize that it was like an active resistance, that I was the first First Nations person in modern history to purchase farmland off reserve in our area. And that attracted the attention of a lot of elders, a lot of local community members who came by to congratulate me and share their memories of growing up on First Nations farms and ranches and food producing businesses here in the old days that were shut down, and as our people were corralled onto reserves. So what happened is all that excitement spread very, very, very quickly within months of us purchasing the farm, and I got invited to go to other First Nations to help them get farms going, and I couldn't do it. So I said, hey, how about you guys come here? Because I can't farm here and there at the same time, and I can teach you. And that's how the Tea Creek model started back in 2020 as a way to retrain First Nations and Indigenous people in agricultural type food production.
Good stuff. What do people learn at the training center?
So we have what we call our 4 quadrants, so Tea Creek 4 quadrants. And the idea, our vision is a healthy Indigenous economy based on abundant food. As I like to say, that means our past is our future again. Like all First Nations were food sovereign in the old days and through much of our history, all of our history really. And to do that, we need a wide range of skills. We don't just need, say, a farmer, but we need mechanics to repair things when they break down. We need plumbers to put in and deal with water. We need carpenters to build and renovate buildings. We need bookkeepers. We need chefs. We need supervisors and managers. We need that kind of full spectrum of interdependency. And so that's the Tea Creek 4 quadrants that we have. And we focus on not just trades training, but other types of skills training as well. For example, we do drone mapping and drone training to do planning your soils and your land management, ecosystem management as one example.
Wow, cool stuff. How did the documentary come to be?
Well, I was approached by the producer, Ben Cox, a couple of years ago. They were looking at doing a documentary on Indigenous food sovereignty and visiting a number of different projects around the country. They came to Tea Creek and just fell in love with what we're doing and said, hey, yeah, this is it. This is the documentary. Tea Creek's doing it. So they got some funding and did a sizzle reel, like a pilot episode. CBC picked up the project and it became the #1 funded Indigenous production within CBC last year. And then they spent you can see in the documentary a full year essentially coming to visit and film each season here at Tea Creek, and as part of the filming they came across so many inspirational stories here, so it was a real chore for the filmmakers to try and whittle it down to a few of the main stories which you now see in the film.
Always is a challenge to do that. Jacob, I understand though since filming that the farm has had an extremely challenging year. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely, yeah. So number one, our main funder didn't come through for the first time ever, which was a ministry of the provincial government here declined to support us. So our funding level dropped to less than 50%. However, private supporters and contributors have been going up every year, so we were able to operate on that side. That was a challenge. And then weather-wise, we faced the most severe drought essentially on record. We were 5 out of 5, as high as the droughts go in terms of their ratings. And then we just very recently got hit by rain, atmospheric rivers coming in and kind of flooding us out at the end of our season. But despite all that, we still managed to get a lot of food produced, and we managed to distribute it out to our Indigenous communities and some non-Indigenous people as well. So a couple weeks ago, we distributed out over 15,000 pounds to over 400 families that came to harvest here at Tea Creek. And we also give away our food on free Farm Stand Fridays, which we did throughout the summer and fall as well.
Awesome stuff. It sounds like you're doing great work out there, Jacob. Appreciate you talking to us, and looking forward to watching the documentary.
Please, yeah, check it out on GEM. It's free and it's available now. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Definitely make sure to check that one out on the CBC GEM app. Thank you for that, Dennis. That's all for our midday newscast for this Monday, October 21st. I'll be back for your evening newscast in a few hours. Make sure to join us then. From our staff from across the country, hi, miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again. Ekse.